Hey guys, we'll talk about the quick pre-market pop. Made most of my money on two trades in the pre-market. I did not have shares of CDIO. I actually did catch a few longs on that thing, but my bigger trades were um, NEPT and CUEN. Um, NEPT, we'll start with this one. So they put out some PR, put out some news, and I've talked about news and PRs before, but yeah, I actually made a video on NEPT back in September, and I already know it's low float, POS. And if you're ever debating if news means something or not, overall, if the chart looks like this, if stock is consistently reverse splitting and is down 99.9999%, you can be pretty sure that any news that comes out is meaningless. So I was already bearish. I already know it's a low float pre-market pop, and here's a quick pre-market pop pattern. Now this volume is actually pretty decent for this type of pattern. This is pushing 400K candles, and I was a little hesitant to get in too quickly, but we'll go to the book. And one thing that made me just kind of size in right away was go back to the pre-market. I always like to see the second push. And the way this pattern works a lot is the second push often tops out right away. And we saw this today on CUN and NEPT. Um, Now, if you watched my video on CMMB, you saw, this exact pattern come back under VWAP, reclaim VWAP, bids following up on the book map and squeezing. So also, given that this was actually a lot of times this pattern doesn't trade close to 500,000 shares a minute. Um, so I was just gonna enter. I waited for the second push to 162. I saw that. See if it shows here. They start stacking an ask at 165, and I saw that there's no bids following this up. I was like, all right, well, just reading the tape on this pullback, I saw these, you had these like 10-cent, 12-cent soaks that weren't really going anywhere. There was kind of a lack of buying. It was breaking into the high 140s, and there was a lack of buying. I'm like, all right, let me just throw some limits there. I'll show you my chart. You can see my chart. I saw a lack of bid support. I saw 165, and even though my risk was kind of risking a big ask up here at the top, I saw the lack of bid support. I saw the lack of buying, and I'm like, this pattern is a big reward type pattern. If it works, let me just go in. And the trade started working, and I noticed a 30K, just like how there's a 35K ask up here, there's a 30K at 139. I was like, well, that becomes the main level. Comes down. There's a lot of empty space up to 139, so we get a big push. As we see here, there's actually very few orders touching it. This 30K ask is still intact. I honestly should have added. That was on this push here, right? So that's why this candle tops here. 30K ask. Not a whole lot of bid support following this up. And then as it starts fading, we get another, again, like every single time we get a pull back into some bids. See, because here's where the first, like, not even a lot of bids, but there's some bids down there. There's enough bids to catch the stock from fading. Um, Anytime there's empty space on the book can always be kind of attacked, right? But what I realized with Bookmap, what's really nice about risk management with Bookmap is that you can use these ask levels as resistance. You don't need to guess. You don't need to look at a million different charts to know where resistance is. You can just look at the book and be like, okay, there's a 30,000 share ask here. My average is in the 140s. Let me just see what the reaction to this. If something like, if I saw bigger bids down here and then we got this like VWAP rotation, like think CMMB, where this ask got taken out. Now a 30,000 share ask might become like a 20, 30,000 share bid at the same, it's called a book flip. They book flip it, where the ask becomes a bid and then there's more follow-up bids. And yeah, CMMB was an example of this pattern, going up, coming under VWAP and rotating and squeezing the new highs. Um, By this point, I'm just reading the book to see what happens with this ask, and then it doesn't even get tested. And then he moves it down, and I consider this in most contexts to be very bearish when um, this big guy in the ass keeps moving his shit, and we actually see him move it down here to 126. That doesn't get tested. Moved it down here to 120. That gets filled a little bit, but it starts fading. You see another ask. You see another ask. You're starting to see now. Sometimes in the on a very 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 strong stock, which I would not consider a pre-market pop that's quickly losing volume to be strong. Has potential like CMMB to come back up, but in most of the time I'm having a bearish biases pattern. But on strong stocks, sometimes you'll see big ass walk a stock down, walk a stock down, walk it down, and then do some crazy strong move. Um, but I'm overall bearish this pattern. I just, this is what this rollover is. It's like, here's an ask, here's an ask, here's an ask. And it did get a big crack, cover some down there near one, and then I just held the market open and then covered the rest. Um, in the market open, that's what's nice about this pattern is even though my risk was a little wider than it usually is, um, these patterns have 30, 40, 50% fade potential. So it's great. It's worth trying. It's a pattern that's worth trying. CUEN was the other one. Now, I was actually not looking at this when this crazy, again, we had this like 250% pop or whatever this was. I wasn't really looking at this. Essentially, I was like, making coffee semi at my desk, so trying to I didn't think I would get another pattern after NEPT so quickly. Um, and a few people in my Discord room, information down below in the description, actually hit this. Like I said, I always like to, if there's a big pre-market pop, I usually like to wait for the second push, see how that push reacts. This type of pattern, right? It can make usually my rule is it can make one more high as long as it tops out relatively quickly. I'm still pretty bearish. We saw this on SPRC. Um, we saw this on APT. We saw this here. And we go to again. This move happens so quickly. It's almost hard to read the book because of the book was so empty. The reason these moves are so aggressive is because I'm trying to. You'll see this. Um, yeah. So here's that push. Like you'll see that the book is almost completely empty. There was a big ask here that this person took away and they did another squeeze. There's like no orders on this book. That's why I went in, especially in the pre-market where there aren't any halt levels, you get moves from 2.6 to 3.5 in a matter of 15 seconds, right? Just because thin order book. Both in this works both ways. To the upside is no orders, but to the downside is no orders, and you get this crazy squeeze. You get one or two asks start to show up, and then it's just a dollar up, dollar down in a matter of 45 seconds. It can be really hard to read that, but I'll show you my chart. I did not short that, but what I did short, see, is that my, no, that's NEPT. I have another chart. Oh, I closed it. That's why it's not. Let me show you my CEUN chart. I gotta make it smaller. Okay. So as you see, I shorted this here. It looks like a huge chase. And obviously it ended up working. I held for a fade in the market open, but why would I short why would I short this candle here? Like what's the thinking? Because I'm fine with missing the first move if I get a second move, and oftentimes the second move needs to be some type of backside clear out, some type of aggressive push, some type of move you've seen on my videos where you get like 4, 5, 6 straight up green candles off of support, looks really bullish, low volume pullback, the ask starts to stack, the bids don't follow it up. Like if anyone's been watching my videos last 3 weeks, you'll see what type of move I'm waiting for, but this doesn't follow any of that, so it's like what's the idea behind this type of move? And really this is just a book map read based on a level 2 trick that you sometimes see. I almost don't even want to teach this as an entry signal. It's quite rare and context dependent, but um, here's this pop. Oops. Oh god. Gonna have to go back. There's this pop in a pre-market at 8:38, 7:38 Central Time. Sorry guys. This move. No, I meant to click this. So this move gets above, it was like 240, I think. Yeah, got above 240, and somebody threw up 30,000 shares on the bid. I was like, okay. Just because there's a big bid doesn't mean there's going to be continuation. And in fact, the idea behind a huge bid showing up here is it will act as support and keep continuing, right? But one thing I noticed was after this 30,000 share bid showed up, somebody starts stacking the ask, right? Starts stacking the ask. And I noticed on the tape, I'm reading the market orders going through the tape, or the limit buy orders above the ask, or whatever you want to call it in the pre-market. I just noticed there's no buying. The ask is walking it down, and this is a little trick I learned from All Day Faders, who learned it from Jesse Livermore, who covers it in Jesse Livermore's books, about how people will throw up big bids sometimes. It's context dependent. And again, this did a pre-market pop, which is a bearish pattern, and this is CUEN is a low flow POS, so that's all bearish. And I noticed this ask being walked down. He's not getting filled. He's not getting filled. And then I put my orders with this ask in the 240s and more in the high 230s on this crack, and I did get filled around this average because, again, they throw up a big bid to fill the ask up higher. There's no real buying, and then the ask is taken out. In fact, if you look really closely, I believe let's see, the ask here, it was much bigger, right? Yeah, there's like, nah, he got completely sold into. It turns out sometimes they pull the bid. In this case, that bidder, this big ass just shoved into this bidder, and that bidder got completely filled. Um, but I noticed that, by the way, in terms of risk management, there were very little orders to the upside, so I really was keeping my risk at around 250s because I realized I was chasing pretty hard with a candle like this, and I thought that little trick was pretty bearish. I thought it was pretty funny that this big bidder showed up and then this ask started pushing it down into the bidder, um, and I just wanted to get filled with that guy. So it was very discretionary, and then there was a lot of empty order book stuff in the pre-market. Sorry, man, the pre-market pop is kind of, and then there was like one bidder at 2, but as long as stay below 250, I didn't really care. And then yeah, it just another fade into the open, and like it ends up being like a 40% here to here ends up being a 40% trade. So neat little trick. Really hard to kind of get in on this. This candle was insane. It went up $1 and down $1 in 45 seconds. If you can react fast enough, that's great. Definitely hard to do a lot of size in a candle like that. It's so quick. And your risk management's a little wonky because the order book was so thin up there. But yeah, a few guys in my room hit that in the 3s and 320s and stuff, and they caught a 70%, 60% fade. So yeah. Anyway, double pre-market pop pattern, pretty cool. And yeah, those were my two main trades. Like I said, I did not have shares of CDIO, so I didn't really trade that. Only thing you need to know about CDIO, CDIO is that I mentioned this in my room. I was like, guys, on stocks that make crazy parabolics to the upside, and I mentioned this on INVO too, and TPST. If you walk into those videos, the crazy multi-day runners or these plays that go on 500, 1,000, 2,000% moves. On the front side, they tend to have a crazy backside. And in this case, what is even backside? It was, it opened like 10, 15% away from high day and it squeezed. But a lot of shorts will try to aggressively hit the first pop. They see the stock went up 1,000% or whatever it did. It pulls back 50%, and everything after that, shorts just think is backside. It's backside. And you got to be careful, just like INVO and just like TPST. You got to be careful because even if it is backside, a lot of times um, they'll squeeze the early shorts, and in this case, they just squeezed everybody. It just continues went straight up. Luckily, Trade Zero had really expensive shares on this. I didn't want to pay for it, so um, there are definitely a bunch of interesting games on the book map in terms of longs. But only thing you really gotta know, um, empty space, these quick pullbacks, quick pullback here, quick pullback here on strong stocks have the potential to squeeze, right? Um, it's really on, and it's funny here. We got a retail flag. Look at this retail flag right here, right? So it's the deep 20% pullbacks that make new highs, and it's the retail flag that fails, right? Now, obviously, this soaked midday came back up. There were tons of bids on this thing, but they weren't big bids. It was funny. They had like there's like 20,000 shares at every penny. There's shares at 160, 158, 159, 157, 150. It wasn't like any like monster 100. Some 100K bids did show up on this squeeze over here, but during this consolidation and also during these under VWAP pullbacks, there wasn't like any monster bids, but there were a bunch of consistent bids, 10 to 15 to 20K at every penny level. So they just had these on all these pullbacks here, here, here. They just had 10, 15, 20, 10, 15, 20 at like every single penny. And then the selling volume ran out, and the bids just never left the building. So but yeah, one of the big lessons in manipulated stocks, right? Especially a market open when the volatility is the biggest, like these end up being the longs, right? These quick pullbacks end up being the longs, and then the obvious retail pattern ends up being a trap. Now, it was a temporary trap that came up later, but any retail who was chasing this move, here's a support swipe, here's a support swipe, this is kind of what happens from people who miss the manipulated move, right? And they're trying to dip by the move at the top, right? And then of course an actual better long comes later. So yeah, that's what I got to say about that. Luckily, didn't need to trade it on the short side and didn't really take any losses today. Really, I just kind of focused on NEPT, CUEN, and I had a small short that did work on VINO, and that's about it. So have a good one, guys.